Hello, everyone, and the participants are still entering our virtual room. But let me welcome everyone to this EU Circular Talks on extended producer responsibility for textiles, taking responsibility for Europe's textile waste. My name is Sophie Boeteligier. I work for OVAM, the Public Waste Agency of Flanders, where I work on EU and international circular economy policy developments. I'm very happy to welcome you all to this virtual event, which is a collective effort of OVAM, the European Environmental Bureau, EURIC, Ecopreneur, Eurocommerce, and the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Before we start, let me share with you some housekeeping rules. This webinar is being recorded. Please mute yourself if you haven't done so yet and keep your camera off. After the presentations by our invited speakers, there will be time for Q&A and discussion. In case you would like to ask a question or share a comment or interesting information with all participants, please use the chat function. I will now give the floor to Emily McIntosh, Policy Officer for Textiles at the European Environmental Bureau, who will introduce today's program. And after Emily's intervention, Killian Lowen, ESC Vice President, will give some opening remarks. Emily, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sophie, and good afternoon, everybody. So today we're here to explore EPR for textiles. So the OECD defines EPR as a market-based instrument which is used to promote total life cycle environmental improvements of product systems by extending the responsibilities of the manufacturer of the product to various parts of the product's life cycle, particularly the take-back, recovery, and final disposal of the product. And we all know, everyone here, that it's clear that EPR will be essential for member states in their toolbox when it comes to implementing the regulatory requirement to separately collect textiles by 2025. But what does an EPR system for textiles look like? Where does responsibility begin? And how do we go about setting EPR for textiles across different member states? How do we set the fees? And how do we allocate the revenue? These are some of the questions that we're really looking forward to getting into today, that our speakers will explore. We've brought together a diverse group of stakeholders over 2 panels. So the first panel will look at what issues EPR schemes for textiles can help to solve. And then each panel will be followed by an intervention from the European Commission to respond to some of the panelists. And in the second panel, we will hear from different stakeholders about their experiences and their expectations when it comes to setting EPR for textiles, once again followed by some reactions from the Commission. And then we'll move into a question and answer session, so don't hesitate to ask your questions and start discussing already in the chat. But to kick us off, it's now over to the EESC Vice President, Killian Lohan, for some brief opening remarks. Over to you, Killian.
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here today. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of the organisers for bringing forward such an important topic and bringing everybody together to have this discussion. My name, as you said, Emily, is Killian Lohan. I'm the Vice President of the European Economic and Social Committee, but I also worked as rapporteur on a lot of our opinions based on circular economy and the different detail of that. And indeed, from one of those opinions, I proposed the establishment of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, and I've been an active member on that since its establishment. So we already know, I think, within this audience, the importance of the transition to a circular economy, how essential that is. And at the ESC, we recognise that bringing stakeholders together in order to facilitate that transition is a really important element. And that's why we joined forces with the European Commission to create that circular economy stakeholder platform, which is, as you know, one of the co-hosts for today's event. And I think I would best describe that platform as a one-stop shop for the circular economy community, where we try to bring everybody together to share ideas, to share challenges, and to try and push for this transition to take place in a way that is facilitated by the institutions, but actually driven by the network of stakeholders themselves. And although the platform has a European focus, the collaboration requests come in from international bodies and institutions also, who wish to connect with the circular community that is very active within Europe. And one recent request we received was from the World Bank. They're running a survey to understand what are the perceptions of circular economy stakeholders on the key challenges that are being faced by the public sector in the EU when pursuing this transition that we're talking about to circularity. They also at the World Bank want to understand which capacities would be required to address those challenges. So I think this is a really key opportunity for stakeholders to be able to input into a coordinated means of identifying challenges and understanding perceptions. They want to hear your views on this, the World Bank, and we'd encourage you to fill out the questionnaire through the link that is being shared in the chat there. I think by gathering more information and having more input, obviously we can get a better picture, and we're delighted to have been able to work with a group like the World Bank on this, because understanding the key challenges is an essential part of how we're going to move forward in the circular community. And I think the EPR schemes for textiles could really solve a lot of the problems that we have within that particular sector. And I can't think of a better concept to be discussed within the context of an EU circular talk than EPR for textiles, because this is what we envisioned when designing the circular economy stakeholder platform, was these very type of events where we can ensure there's open dialogue, open discussion, and sharing of best practices and learning together, and being honest in recognizing what the challenges are that we face, and putting pressure on policymakers to ensure they deliver for what the stakeholders need in terms of support to be able to effectively make the transition. And so I think this initiative by OVAM, EURIC, EEB, Ecopreneur and Eurocommerce to focus this EU circular talk on this subject is particularly welcome. We know that extended producer responsibility has been implemented widely for years in Europe to ensure producers take responsibility for the end of life of products that are placed on the market. And we know that we have these EPR schemes in place for packaging, for batteries, for electric waste, for instance. But we also have identified within our work in the ESC, and I'm sure many will agree with this, the importance of eco-design and the need still to improve the eco-design element when we look at different products. We've also talked about modulating EPR fees so that we're providing incentives for those who are performing best in terms of increasing the level of circularity of products, and providing a disincentive for those who are performing less well and not hitting those key criteria of repairability, of recyclability, of being able to disassemble and remanufacture products. So we know this is also an important tool, modulating the EPR fees. And it's something that we've, excuse me, pushed continually within our work within the committee, liaising with the stakeholders to shine a light on specific issues like that. I also believe circular public procurement can be a huge tool to use in order to ensure that public spending is going towards the right type of products and driving change within the market. And I also mentioned that we did work on the eco design program. Sorry, I mentioned that we have this interest in eco design, but we also did a specific input into the eco design work program, where we focused on the need for extended producer responsibility to be linked directly to eco design also. So there's so many different elements that I know are going to be discussed throughout the session. I wanted to touch on some of them. There's many more, including life cycle costing and other opportunities to look at the detail of how EPR works and how we can move it forward. But I will close by saying that the important thing for us is to receive as many good practices as possible onto the stakeholder platform website. So please go to that website and upload your good practices, and please share with the World Bank your feedback through the survey that they are doing and collating your inputs. Thank you very much, Emily. I hope I didn't go on too long.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Killian, for those really good introductory remarks setting the scene. So I'd like to invite the panel one panelists to put their cameras on and to join us on the virtual stage. So that's Mathieu, Helmer, and Miriam. And we're going to just start straight away with the first intervention from Mathieu Rama, who's from Reuse, the network of social enterprises active in reuse, repair, and recycling. And he will give us their experience on EPR. Over to you, Mathieu.
Thank you very much, Emily. So first of all, I wanted to start with an interesting fact. So I represent Reuse, which, as Emily said, is a network of social enterprises active in reuse, repair, and recycling. And Textiles is the type of product which is collected the most by our members. So it's their main source of income. And in fact, in France, where EPR for Textiles has been set first, it's actually social enterprises who were at the initiative of setting that up. At the time when EPR for Textiles was developed in France, charities were struggling with the very low price of secondhand textiles on the global market at the time. So they needed support to keep on with their collection, sorting, and resale activities. So the EPR scheme for textiles in France achieved that purpose, but unfortunately, it was at the expense of reuse rates. So operators from Emmaüs France, so a network of French social enterprises, they agree that EPR is a great financial support to their activities. However, they have to recognize that the objectives of the producer responsibility organizations are often in contradiction with the principles of Emmaüs, because the objective of producer responsibility organization is not necessarily to maximize reuse rates. The objective is more to collect as much textiles waste as possible, whatever the treatment after the sorting process will be. So ideally, the objectives should not only be quantitative, but also qualitative. Collection models and sorting operations should be designed to extract as many reusable items as possible, and it is not what is currently happening in France. So we believe that EPR schemes could implement the waste hierarchy and ensure that prevention, reuse, and preparing for reuse activities are indeed prioritized over premature recycling, incineration, and landfilling. So to reach this objective, there will be a need for stricter minimum requirements and targets to be achieved by EPR schemes. So if you look at waste electronics, for example, which is a type of product for which member states have to set up some form of producer responsibility according to the WE directive, there are targets set at EU level for their collection and treatment, which is not the case yet for textiles. So all the EPR schemes set up for WE in the EU have to reach these targets. So of course, these targets have their limits because they do not separate recycling activities from preparing for reuse yet. Everything is counted together, but at least there are some minimum objectives to reach. In countries where these objectives are a bit more ambitious than at EU level, so I'm speaking about Spain, where there are preparing for use targets for electronics. So EPR schemes have to meet these separate targets which are set at national level. And we believe that this is the only way to ensure that the waste hierarchy is truly respected within an EPR model, because in the absence of targets respecting the waste hierarchy, there are risks that recycling will be prioritized over prevention and reuse. Now, why? Because the governance of EPR models is still very much between the hands of producers and importers. who have a direct interest in making the EPR fee as low as possible. This way, the impact of the EPR fee on the price of the product will be as low as possible, allowing them to keep on selling their new products more easily. So they will be drawn to waste management models that are less costly, which is often the case of recycling when compared to reuse and preparing for reuse, simply because these activities require more investments in terms of logistic and manpower, even though they make more sense in terms of resource efficiency. Another reason for producers and importers to prioritize recycling over reuse within EPR models is the fact that their main business model is to sell new products, at least at the moment, and they don't necessarily want to finance the competition. So they might see the development of reuse activities as a threat to their models. So this leads me to my final point, which is to say that the governance of EPR schemes, if set up for textiles, should be more collegial. It is actually something which is encouraged by the updated Waste Framework Directive. So if producers and importers remain the main actors dealing with how the EPR fee is set and how it is spent, there will always be a limit to their proper implementation of the waste hierarchy. So with operators, social enterprises, local authorities, environmental NGOs should all have some form of power in the implementation of EPR. Everything should remain under the control of the government, of course.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm
Yeah.
going to
So I will stop there. I was about to summarize, but that's okay, I think.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass the floor now to Helmer Wierstra, who's the Senior Program Leader of Circular Economy at Naturally Milieu in the Netherlands, and who has lots of experience on EPR in the Netherlands and following the setting up of EPR for textiles there. So over to you, Helmer.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome everybody. I would like to start with saying some things about why we believe that that EPR is an essential element in the policy toolkit for a circular economy, and why that is. Because let us begin by thinking why we even want a circular economy, not as a goal in itself, in our opinion, but as a means to create an economy that has less environmental impact, less impact on climate, less impact on biodiversity, and that makes us less dependent on scarce resources that are only found in countries with difficult regimes and poor labor conditions. A resource-efficient economy is better for our planet. And then the second question is, how can you make your economy more circular? Well, when we look at the other big transition that a lot of us are working on, the energy transition, we see that the instrument of subsidies is used a lot to stimulate the energy sources that we want. One could say that we are molding our energy system with a lot of public tax money. We believe that trying to shape our circular economy with that kind of instrument is not the way forward. What the policy objective for circular economy should be is to create a business environment that improves the competitive advantage for circular and sustainable business models and propositions over the linear models of today. The reason why linear or less sustainable business models are more competitive today is because causing environmental problems is often free or at least too cheap. As long as environmental costs are not incorporated in the prices of products, circular economy will remain a small niche. But what can a government do? Well, there are several policy instruments that a lot of you probably have heard of that can give external effects a price. Tradable rights, for instance, like in our ETS system for CO2, or the quota that we have for fisheries. There are several fiscal policies, like a tax on the use of pesticides that we have in Denmark. And extended producer's responsibility is, in fact, another instrument that can internalize some of the external effects. And it's especially suitable for external effects that can be diminished post-consumption, especially suitable for consumer goods. That's why we have it on packaging, on batteries, on textiles now. So then back to the general question, what issues could EPR help to solve? Well, EPR, when properly implemented, creates a business incentive for circular textiles. That means that it provides funds for a recycling industry for textiles on the one hand, but on the other hand, even more important probably, it creates an incentive for producers to avoid these costs. The way to avoid costs is to produce better recyclable and longer lasting textiles, making us less dependent on new raw materials and thus creating the environmental impact. And I specifically mentioned properly implemented because this is where the eating of the pudding comes. Because it is crucial to formulate your goals properly. Because do we want to stimulate the use of recycled content, or do we want to put a goal on the recyclability? In the Netherlands, for packaging, for instance, we always have a fee on the recyclability, a modulating fee on the recyclability of packaging. For textiles, we are now looking at the amount of recycled content in textiles to modulate the fees on. And I'm really curious what the people in this meeting think about that way of modulating fees. And another thing Mathieu already mentioned is, how can you stimulate reuse in a proper way? Well, in the Netherlands, we are now looking at the reselling of stuff. And I believe that textiles, they are a reusable product in itself. Nobody buys textiles, or at least almost nobody buys textiles to wear them only once. So what we need is lasting textiles. And the number of times it is resold is of less importance than, for instance, the number of times a product can be washed. I think it's only yesterday that I read that Primark, one of our big companies, they test the durability of their clothing, and they're looking now, they define a product suitable for the market when you're able to wash it 5 times. What is a piece of textile that can only be washed 5 times? And now they're increasing it because they have some sort of a social responsibility policy. And now want to test it for 30 times washable products. But I think this line of thinking could help us, like when is a textile suitable for the market, and on what kind of indicators should we use to define reusability. And I think this is probably an indicator that we could use. I already see you humping. I believe I'm going to finish. But what I also want to stress is that EPR alone will never solve the entire problem. What we need is added policies on product requirements via effective minimum eco-design requirements. And another thing, we need policies on misleading claims. We have proper health policies on food. We do not have proper European policies on what you can claim on sustainability. And there's a lot of false claims on the sustainability of consumer products. So far.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Helmer. I'm going to pass now to Miriam Triveshka, who is the Sustainability and Public Affairs Director at Target Group for the Europe, Middle East and Africa division. And they are following the development of a new EPR scheme for building and construction products in the context of the implementation of the French law on circular economy, amongst many other things. So Miriam, over to you for your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. So thank you very much for inviting a company to give its testimonial. So we are young as Target in the landscape of EPR schemes, because that's very new for us and it's a first in France. So a few words about Target. Target is a leading manufacturer of floor covering solutions for household, hospitals, schools, offices and sports facilities. We are making durable products, sometimes for 25, 30 years. So we are not in the fast construction system or and Target delivers multiple type of floor coverings like linoleum, vinyl, carpet or wood floors in more than 100 countries. So it's a big scale of activity for this company, and the group has been committed to circular economy. We developed our own collection and recycling framework. We call it Restart 10 years ago. And we know the difficulties and the time needed, the innovation that we need to develop to engage in a transition to a circular economy. So hence, extended producer responsibility as a topic for studies and better understanding became very high on our agenda. With the French law on circular economy, we are preparing for this new requirement that in January 22. And to do so, Target is a member as well of Valobat, which aims at becoming a reference producer responsibility organization for this new extended producer responsibility on construction products. So today, the topic of the discussion is about textile. Textile is on top of the European Commission agenda, and we see here an opportunity to develop a EU-wide framework, as it is important to have such ambition. We see the growing interest of many countries on EPR schemes development, and we are indeed, as Target, firmly convinced that it is the way forward in the future for supporting the circular economy. Nevertheless, we see the potential multiplication of local, national, extended producer responsibility schemes as an issue in the context of the single market and would prefer a more harmonized framework at EU level, because we want to avoid for industries and manufacturers the burdens, and as well avoid the market fragmentation, which is not good for the European companies. And as we have European supply chains, it might as well be natural and a consequence that circular economy needs as well to be discussed at European level, which is indeed all the accumulation and multiplication of national EPR schemes will not help develop. So that's for the harmonized framework that we would love to see from a European perspective on the different types of EPR schemes. Indeed, as Target and as we have been working on improving the circularity of our product, we are very positive to eco-modulation. Eco-modulation needs to incentivize the companies which are already investing in the circular economy and provide as well some encouragement to the newcomers to that one. We feel that innovation for circularity needs to be supported, and as Mathieu mentioned, reuse is one aspect, and of course the whole hierarchy of waste management which is behind needs as well to be supported at the right level, not promoting one instead the other, but indeed promoting eco-designing for recycling technologies, taking into consideration as well the environmental impact of those recycling technologies. But eco-modulation can stimulate the innovation of the industry towards more sustainable practices and sustainable value chains. Again, it is important, as my last one, it is important as well that EPR schemes, which are indeed some kind of large framework for mainstreaming recycling, recognize as well the initiatives of the individual companies in the framework. That's very important because individual companies are very often SMEs, which are striving for circularity in a niche, and they need to find their ways in a more coordinated EPR system in countries.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Miriam. And now we're going to move to some reactions from the European Commission. So can I ask, I'm sorry, Gilles, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Gilles Berens, I hope I've pronounced it properly.
Yeah, that's very good. My name is Gilles Berens, indeed. Yeah, sorry for the difficult name. I work in the waste management unit of DG Environment of the European Commission. We are not the lead unit when it comes to drafting the EU strategy on textiles, but we really provide the input for the waste policy aspects. So that's why I'm happy to have the opportunity to react to a few things that were said. So as you know, a key deliverable of the Circular Economy Action Plan is to modernize EU waste legislation. And currently we are still working on the textile strategy. So I can sadly not really commit to much more than what was already said in the action plan. But what is clear, of course, is that an important pillar of the strategy will be to improve the management of used textiles and textile waste. And in line with the waste hierarchy, the strategy will really aim at stimulating waste prevention, including reuse in the first place, in order to limit waste generation in the first place. And then, of course, where it cannot be avoided, we have to make sure that its economic value is recovered as much as possible. As I said, yeah, we are still working on the textile strategy. We will consider different legislative measures, such as EPR. And yeah, like all the speakers have stressed, we see that extended producer responsibility has proven to be an effective instrument to improve both separate collection and yeah, the consequent management in line with the waste hierarchy. We also note, of course, that several member states are already considering introducing EPR schemes for textiles. So these are all things that we take into account. And I think that many of the speakers already mentioned different variables that we have to take into account when we undertake this work. So as Rius has said, Mathieu has said, we have to ensure that our legislative measures, whatever they are, stimulate the treatment in line with the waste hierarchy. So it should incentivize prevention, including reuse in the first place. We should prevent that recycling goes at the cost of waste prevention activities. And as Nature and Milieu also mentioned, I agree that waste policy is only one strand of making the textile strategy, or the textile sector, more sustainable. There's also work to be done on product design, of course. And in that light, I just want to highlight the ongoing work on the sustainable products interface, which is aimed at making sure that products become more sustainable, more reusable, more durable. That work has really has highlighted a number of key value chains, and textiles are one of them. So we will try to roll out this sustainable product interface landscape first for textiles as well. So thanks. Maybe for now we'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, and we'll obviously come back to you after the second panel again for some more reactions from the Commission side. So thank you so much to the first, the panel 1 panelists, and we'll now move to panel 2. So can I ask the panel 1 to leave the stage, and panel 2 to switch their cameras on and join me on the virtual stage. So welcome everybody, thank you so much for being here. We're going to jump straight in with the first intervention from Cécile Febvre, who is from the French Ministry of Ecological Transition, working on waste prevention and EPR. So over to you, Cécile, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. So we're going to talk about France once more time. Let's start with maybe a general presentation of the EPR scheme for textile waste in France, which was established in 2007. And as the other EPR schemes in France, the producers, that is to say the marketers, are obliged to contribute for the management and treatment of the waste resulting from their activity. They may fulfill their obligations either by setting up an individual system or by making a financial contribution to an eco-organization approved by the state. Up to now, there is a single eco-organization approved by the state for textile from the beginning of the implementation of the EPR scheme. Well, this scheme for textile waste is financial. That is to say that the eco-organization has no operational responsibility, but collects contribution from the marketers and allocates them, in particular by financing the waste management operators. And in this case, they are sorting operators, and Mathieu from the first panel mentioned it. They are, well, most of them are social enterprises. And the total amount of contribution in this scheme reached more or less 25 million euros in 2019. So what are the performances of the scheme as we have this experience from 2007? Well, the collection of textile waste has steadily increased since the introduction of the scheme. It has risen by 150% since 2007 and now represents around 40% of the estimated waste stream. But well, however, this result is still far from the target we set to the eco-organism, which was set at 50% for 2019. And regarding the other performances, 60% of the textile waste collected is directed towards reuse, but it's highly dependent on third countries for the reuse. The best quality waste, representing about 4% of the collection, is resold in Western countries, and lower quality clothes are exported mainly overseas. Recycling concerned about 1/3 of the waste collected, and the rest is dedicated to produce solid recovered fuel. So what are the perspectives? The anti-waste law passed in February 2020 provides for an important reform of the extended producer schemes. It reinforces the role of the eco-organization in improving the environmental performance of the textile sector. For instance, one of the main challenges, in the specifications, the eco-organism will have to achieve quantified objectives in terms of reuse, repair, recycle. The penalty system is modified to ensure that the eco-organization will comply with the objectives. There are other measures regarding traceability. Some important measures are related to supporting reuse through the creation of a reuse fund, thanks to allocation of the marketers, and also the eco-organism will have to finance reparation through a repair fund to reduce the cost of repair for consumers when they go to a certified repairers. We talk about also eco-modulations during the first panel, and eco-organism will have also to implement a bonus-malus mechanism on the contributions to encourage eco-design. So we are working on the revision of the specifications of the EPR scheme for textile. It's about to begin to integrate this reform, but it's an important one to address the challenges to improve the performances of our scheme. So I'm about to finish. Just my conclusion. France relies on EPR scheme for textile, as for many other products. We really consider that this instrument is essential to address the treatment of post-consumer products, and it's quite an appropriate policy option to prevent waste, to promote eco-design, and to support the achievement of public goals in terms of reuse, recycling, material management. Our experience shows that the EPR system for textile has increased the collection of used textiles. However, this sector must now improve all its performances in terms of collection of textiles, knowing that lots of used textiles are still thrown in the bin. And also it must improve the outlets for reuse and recycling, and it has to create also incentives to eco-design. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now I'll pass the floor to Femke den Hartog from SME United, who are working on the preparation of an EPR scheme for textiles in the Netherlands, and have been one of the founders of the Dutch Responsible Business Conduct Agreement on Garments and Textiles. So over to you, Femke.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for participating in this event. What I think is very important for the Netherlands, that we are at the moment we are developing an extended producer responsibility scheme, and we just want it to be more than only a waste scheme, because we believe that you can also use the EPR system as an enabler to make the circular transition in our industry work. So our idea is that we really try to motivate companies to make more recycled to use more recycled content in their textiles, and at the other hand, we also want people that we also want that at the other side of the chain, after the collection, that more used textiles can be recycled, because I think a lot of is already said, but I think a big problem at this moment is there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of initiatives, and I see a lot of beautiful pearls, but I don't see a string. And if you really want to make, we have to create capacity to recycle more and to use that content. And I see Baptiste already smiling. But I think that part is really needed. And another part I like to stress in the Dutch EPR system, because I can call a lot of facts and figures, but I think it's more also about a vision. I think when we are talking about a circular economy, that we also have to look into the conditions of how the textile is produced. And it's not only about the conditions by the cut, made and trim in the textiles, but it's also how are you producing those materials in the production countries, but also how are you going to proceed all that used textiles, because it will be enormous amounts, and the capacity to proceed all the used textiles to circular material would be a challenge. And I think that we have to look into this issue on both sides. So it's really a transition in the sector. Well, that's my contribution for now.
Thank you very much, Femke. And I really like the pearl and string metaphor. I've never heard that before. So thank you very much. I'm now going to pass the floor to Jo van Landegem from Circle Tex, who has grown up in the textile and clothing industry through working in a family business, and is active in the Belgian industry federation Crea Moda, and is advocating to boost the circular economy movement with a new modular EPR for textiles. So over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Emily. My name is Jo van Landegem, responsible for quality, safety, sustainability at the industry federation Crea Moda. First of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity from the organizers to talk at this event. I will try to condense and not repeat what has already been said rightfully by all the previous speakers. So I will provide a link here where you can download 2 presentations, and I will take some parts out of those 2 presentations. One is about Circle Tex and the other one is about the sense or the nonsense of an EPR for textiles. So bear with me, I'll try to do it as condensed as possible. Recently, we had the Global Recycling Day. We were reminded how important that is, that we think again not about what we throw away, seeing not waste but opportunity. This is something that we as Belgian industry players, together with other federations, have seen as an opportunity to join forces and to officially announce a new organization. Our organization is called Circle Tex. It's a Belgian platform for the valorization of products made with textiles. Originally, we started off as the collection system, but you can't valorize something if you don't collect. Currently, the system is voluntary, as in Belgium, we have no EPR yet at this point. All textiles in our system are welcome, such as unsold products, because we should definitely ban to destroy unsold products, production waste, or production resources, used products that are not end of life yet, and then last of all, but not least, end of life products. 2022, we start operational wise. We will focus on specific waste streams, flat linens, That means towels, bedding, all these kind of products, workwear, all kind of representative products, and then protective products made with textiles, because there's a lot of these products that follow under certain norm standards that describe how these products should be made. And this is all not thought of or foreseen in a standard EPR. Why do we do this? Because we aim to apply circular economy to all textile waste streams in an economical, ecological, and socially responsible way. Because the old modulus of an EPR and the old thinking does not apply anymore to what we have on this planet at this point. So we wanted to lay the foundation of a new structural cooperation with all stakeholders. That means also consumers. That means authorities, market surveillance, universities, because we need to support new business models, eco-innovation, designing for circularity. We need to extend the lifespan and thus close the circular textile loop. We will do this through industrial upscaling, from selective collecting, sorting, processing, and finally valorization of pre-consumer textile flows and post-consumer textile flows. We will use a digital platform for that, so that all our supply and demand companies can find, organizations, etc., can find each other for the right materials, the right products. This means end users, laundries, collectors, sorters, recycling companies, and many, many, many other stakeholders, but we have no time to go into detail for that. Last thing I wanted to say about CircleTex is that we also think of collaborations, because we need cooperation with the authorities, NGOs, non-profit organizations, meaning the social economy and universities. At the same time, we've also thought that our industry works on a global scale, on a European scale. So there is also, from our confederation Eurotex, a initiative called Rehubs, where we connect our local collection systems, valorization systems of each and every member state, because we're all preparing for the 1st of Jan 2025, where the new waste instructions come into play. So we need separate collection systems in all EU member states. Hence, we need collaboration, because Belgium is a very small country. We cannot do everything in our own countries. We need cooperation, as already said by numerous previous people. Now, concerning the sense or the nonsense of an EPR for textiles. We need to agree that circular economy is not a recycling economy. Very often we see and we hear in proposals or in other EPR systems, it's all about we have linear products and we are going to recycle them. That does not mean we have circular economy. That does not mean that the products are designed for reuse, for prolongation of the product. So circular economy is not about waste. It's about resources, resources management, value retention, and upcycling. Reuse first, recycle last. We follow that to the letter because that is something that is currently missing. Very often we hear one size fits all. Even with the EPR system, we hear this on an EU level. One EPR system fits all textiles. It will never fit fully. So it has been said we need modular EPRs for all types of textile streams, because there are many more than only the fashion garments that are very often explained. We need structural cooperation, shared responsibility to do the awareness creation, to do the research, to do the innovation. And I'm nearly there. When we agree that EPR should be more than a shift of waste responsibility from governments or municipalities to producers, this is the old definition. This is not how we support circular economy. That was the recycling economy support. We could do that already for many years, and this is not what we need today. As I mentioned earlier, no stakeholder should be left out. Last week I was speaking at a social economy event where I did a similar approach, where we said, okay, social economy players are an essential part of circular economy. They cannot be used as cheap labor. They should be fully embedded in circular economy, because it's think global, act local. So we are not going to ship our waste again to the other side of the planet to solve the problem. That is not circularity. last but not least, there is no circularity. There are no circular products if there is not minimum quality. The quality is the foundation of all products, of all circularity. We need basic quality requirements. We have the knowledge, we know how to do it. If you think back 200 years ago, you could buy shoes, leather shoes, with a wooden sole, with a leather part, with nails. They were designed for circularity. You could reuse and wear those shoes indefinitely. We moved on from that design to what we have nowadays. We have the plastic ones. This is something as an example to show that we need to do it. If you don't agree and you don't accept the current realities, then an EPR for textiles is total nonsense. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jo. And now I'm going to pass the floor to Baptiste Carrière-Pradel, who is the chair of the Policy Hub, which is the home, the house of the European apparel and footwear industry, all under one roof, and they work on proposing policies to accelerate circularity. So over to you, Baptiste.
Thank you for the presentation of the Policy Hub, and thanks a lot all of the organizers to have put together such a nice group of people to be able to exchange this perspective. Indeed, we know that on the very specific case of the EPR scheme, it touches much more than purely the industry players and others. That is definitely when we have all of the different parties, may that be the recyclers, the industry actors, all of the different regional and municipal organizations, that we will be able to come to something meaningful ultimately and an impactful EPR scheme. It is in this sense that the Policy Hub has indeed joined forces with different municipalities also and other actors to be able to come up with different propositions that we have shared first with a joint letter that we shared with the Commission, and lately with our joint position paper that we'll be also sharing here today. And I will give you some of the main elements that we want to and that we have promoted in this joint position paper with many different actors. But before that, just to put a bit of general context. Indeed, we take the EPR scheme in the global sense of all of the conversation which are happening right now at EU level as part of the overall textile strategy. So indeed, we know that as a textile sector, we definitely want and we need strong regulation and meaningful one to be able to transform to a full circular system. And we see the EPR piece as one of the elements that will ultimately help us to make this move. We've talked and we've heard different also speakers earlier mentioning, may that be transparency, which is its set of regulation, may that be just, for instance, just now elements regarding improved durability of product, all ideas that we definitely support. But each of them have their own conversation and their own regulation, may that be the Sustainable Product Policy Initiative, all transparency effort. But that means that when we talk around the EPR scheme, we need to be clear about the target we want it to achieve, so that ultimately each piece of regulation will carry its own target and they will all work together, and that they will be all pearls with a string, to quote Femke, and I will come back also on this just shortly after. But I think that's a very key element, because that will allow us to think in the EPR scheme into two ways. First, we need to be very clear on the definition, on the criteria, rules and requirements that we want for the EPR scheme. We've heard, for instance, from different parties that now, as there is many governments trying to think about their own EPR scheme, they will all think about what type of attitude do they want to reward. Is it about having better recycled content, like maybe the Dutch will be wondering? Or like France is now considering, is it about the environmental footprint or the overall product? So that means that anyway, what we need to have to make sure that all of the pearls shine together, that we need to have a proper harmonized approach between all of those, that nothing will be worse than each country to incentivize a different approach. As nice is the approach that one country wants to push, but that ultimately the push needs to be done in, again, one clear direction that has to be given to the general EPR framework. Same way that when we define and once we have the same criteria and definition about waste, this will allow also for better system to be implemented to ultimately make sure that national and regional scheme will all work together, and that we will not have to have different risk of developing inefficient collection or sorting or different system. And it's only by having those different set also of critical enablers that we'll be able to establish a transparent and uniform reporting requirement on waste and resource flow. So again, here in contrast, different national rules could lead to a multiplication of cost and reporting requirement that will render not only the collection inefficient, but therefore also the reporting will be a complication and ultimately will prevent the EPR to play this critical role that we all want to see from it happening. And once we have the critical, once we have agreed on the target that we want the EPR scheme to play, once we have clearly defined what type of eco-modulated fee will come, that we have the clear criteria and rules which are all set at EU level, then we are able to discuss also in the same way of all of the resources that will be collected, sent to the EPR scheme, how do we deploy them for maximum impact? So we know that in order to have efficient system, we need to have proper scaling and development on infrastructure for collection. May that be manual or automated. We have had a nice mention also, for instance, of the initiative of Euratex regarding the Rehab initiative, that we also think is a very interesting initiative to look at. But such initiatives, which are indeed pan-national and that thought at continental level, can only strive depending on indeed the harmony between all of the different national systems behind them. And same, so that once we have discussed about and that we are able to direct resources to be able to have the proper scaling, as I was mentioning about transparency and traceability, once we have the same definition and system and approach national-wise, then we are also in the capacity to be able to support the proper traceability and transparency system for each material flow that will indeed help us to establish a proper functioning market to ultimately enhance high-quality recycled material. That we've heard from multiple manufacturers and other recyclers that this was a challenge because, again, coming back to the lack of definition sometime on the proper definition of waste and different criteria attached to that. And once we have that, we can also think about, and also something that the French EPR scheme is doing, we hopefully will have also enough resources to come back to properly raise awareness between all of the consumers and all different actors that indeed need to take part into the EPR creation, but more importantly, that also will be vital actor once the EPR scheme will be implemented. So that therefore, by having this proper body set, clearly knowing what the EPR, what the role of the EPR is in the context of the big textile strategy, having common criteria, definition and targets for the scheme at European level will enable a proper flow of resources into clearly targeted elements that will ultimately help the EPR to be the success again that we all want it to be. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Baptiste. And now I'll pass the floor to Martin Boschen, who's the Vice President of the Textiles Division of Zurich Textiles. Are you there, Martin? I don't see your camera on.
Oh, it's on. I can see myself.
Okay, oh, sorry, it's just my screen. Well, I'll pass you the floor. Yeah, you're also the CEO of TexAid AG, a charity private partnership in Switzerland. Yeah, working on how to increase demand for recycled products. So over to you.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to the organizers and the audience for being here today to listen to this interesting discussion so far. As you said, I'm Vice President of Europe, which is the Association of European Recycle Organizations. I'm Vice President of the Textile division there. I'm also CEO of TexAid, which is a collector and sorter of post-consumer textiles in several European countries, based in Switzerland, but also active in, for example, Germany, Austria, and other countries. So I think we have heard quite a lot on EPR, so I think I'm second to last today, so I will try not to repeat everything we've heard so far, and try to add a new, maybe a new angle here. So right now, not in many countries, but in some countries, we have a working system on textile collection and sorting and recycling. But this system is basically working on the reuse part, or depending very much on the reuse part of the textile collection, and it comes from the idea. The textile collection was initially a donation of used textiles, so it comes from the idea that the consumer donates his or her old textiles into the textile collection in order then to be reused, and there we come, for example, to the French issue we've heard about, that we have a quite low collection rate still, because people still say, okay, I want to have my reusable part into collection where it's going to be reused, and they don't see textiles as a resource which needs to be recycled. And I think this behavioral shift is something we need to also sponsor or enhanced by the EPR system, which leads, of course, then to a financing problem, because right now the reuse part of the textiles, and we heard that also from Mathieu, is financing the recycling, which is currently a downcycling. I'll come to that later. And without a high reuse part, and this reuse part will go down as collection rates increase, without the high reuse part, the system is not going to be self-financing anymore. So this is maybe an idea why we might need an EPR or some other possibilities. We have different possibilities there. We have the possibility that the producers take responsibility and finance this whole collection, sorting, recycling of the product and take the responsibility there. Or we can also do that as it's done now in some countries by the waste fees, municipalities or citizens pay. What are we doing with these textiles? We heard it also before, around 60% of what is collected at the moment, and that's pretty much the same on all Western European countries, is reused. Only a part of that in Western Europe, the majority is exported. About 1/3 is recycled, the rest is incinerated. If we are talking about recycling, and we heard that also before from you and from others, it's not a real recycling. It's not a circular recycling at the moment. Right now, maybe about 1% of the recycling is in a way that some garment can become a garment again. Most of it is downcycling, so we are in a linear model, just prolonging the linear model by one step. So we can make some fitting material out of this pullover, we can make a wiper out of the shirt, but that's it. After that, it's not recycled anymore. And if we are talking about recyclability, I would like to call that differently. We need something which we would call maybe circularability or something like that. Where we say, okay, we can make something circular out of it again. And also that's an issue, of course, if we're talking about recyclability. Recyclability is easier to achieve. I think we need to talk about circularability. We need to talk about recycled content in new products. This is something where we need to work on, and I think we heard that from Femke. She said that we are talking about capacity. It's not only capacity we are talking about for recycled content, we are also talking about demand. So we need also a system, whatever kind of system we are going to introduce, this system needs to increase the demand for recycled content in textiles and garments. And there we also need to really look into it, because there are two types of recycled content.
If I can just ask you to conclude, Martin, thank you.
Let me just finish that and I will be finished. There are two types of recycled content. One type of recycled content is I can easily make a PET bottle into a pullover. It's much more difficult to take the polyester out of a garment and bring that into a garment. So if we are talking about recycled content, we also need to look that we have a real cycle, or maybe it can be an aid. So we can take the polyester from the pullover and put it into some other polyester product, which we then can recycle again. But right now, if you're talking about recycled content, I will conclude with that, we are mainly talking about recycled content from other products, mainly PET bottles, which are then produced into recycled polyester and then again in a linear model. So this is something which is really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll pass the floor to Dr. Stina Wallström, who's the Director of Regulatory Affairs at IKEA Range and Supply. And she has a lot of experience working on the first-hand experience of harmonizing EPR systems to enable global free and fair trade of secondary raw materials. So over to you for the IKEA perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I have a feeling I should have coordinated my speech with that of Baptiste, because my message to you is very simple. Harmonize, harmonize, harmonize. Only by agreeing on common ways of collecting, sorting, and reporting used textiles, we can create a sound basis for a circular textile economy. That's our only way to do this on a scalable level. Some experiences of IKEA today. Today, different EPR systems are set at member state level, each with different scopes, definitions, registration rules, reporting obligations. Sometimes new EPR schemes are set at a national level and exist only in one or a few countries. And this creates a complex, expensive, and inefficient system. And the last one is the most important, because we are not saving nature by this. We're not creating a circular economy by this. For IKEA, we must frequently report different data at different times to different authorities for the same product. Just in EU, more than 1,000 reports for IKEA home furniture items are submitted every year, and that is not including our food range. What products fall under each scheme varies, sometimes even within the same country if more than one EPR scheme is available within the country. So let's not repeat old mistakes when EPRs for textiles are put into place. Let's harmonize textile EPRs and agree on one common and clear definition of what's in scope of the textile EPR, as well as on the registration and reporting requirements. At IKEA, we definitely support increased collection schemes. We also support the need for market and legal incentives to enable a more circular and sustainable way of operating. In fact, we have pledged to become circular already 2030 and only use renewable and recycled materials in our operations. However, we need a change from the status quo. We need harmonized solutions at an EU level and preferably beyond, because if we can agree within EU, we will really set an example for the rest of the world. In this way, we can optimize administration and ensure that resources are spent in the best way to continuously improve environmental performance. We have so much to win by making sure that textile EPRs are harmonized across member states, especially with regards to what products are in scope, what information to report and in what format, when and how often reporting should occur. Only administration, but administration is never an only for a company. We encourage a centralized EU register to meet the obligations across all member states. In fact, we believe that if we want to introduce eco-modulation fees to encourage more sustainable textile materials, harmonization is the only way forward. Introducing eco-modulation on top of an already scattered system on a national level will increase the level of complexity so much that companies may not be able to take advantage of the modulated fees. Already now we experience situations where the reporting is too complex to be worth it, so to say. So we may fulfill the eco-modulation, but it's not worth reporting it. And IKEA is a big company. And even we have difficulties reporting to the plethora of EPR systems in existence today. For a small company wanting to expand to new markets, it must be nearly impossible to fulfill the varying national reporting obligations. So let's make it easy to do it right. Introduce central reporting to encourage textile producers, big and small, to take their responsibility for the products they sell on the EU markets. Also, make sure to harmonize collection and sorting criteria. We need that to create the large and clean fractions of used textile needed to facilitate a circular economy. I say it one more time, just to make sure you all remember. Harmonization is key. Unite and conquer. Let's work together and get it right for textiles. We have everything to win. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stina. And now we're going to pass back to the European Commission, who is hopefully still, yes, to react to the second the panel 2 panelists. So over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for all the very relevant points, and I think indeed there were a lot of common points that you agreed upon already. So I take good note of the fact that you call for a need to collaborate, and I think also that is what we are doing already. I think we are trying to reach out as much as possible to all the sector's stakeholders. So that means producers, waste management operators, collectors, reuse organizations, and I'm forgetting many more. But that is indeed what we are trying to do as much as possible. I also think that a very relevant point was made to the fact that, yeah, textiles consist of very different products. So in our interventions, we need to make sure that we have a clear definition of the products or the waste that is targeted with such an intervention. So yeah, the point well taken. I also take note that all the speakers highlighted the need to harmonize. So yeah, the point is well taken. I think indeed in our policy interventions we need to make sure that we stimulate an EU market for secondary raw materials and try to address currently existing barriers to transboundary trade. Yeah, so that's an important point. Regarding recycling, I agree. We have to make sure that the waste or the waste that cannot be avoided should be recovered as much as possible, and there's still a lot of space for improvement there. We see that there are several textile recycling techniques in place, but still also being developed. And nonetheless, we see that there's still a limited scale of recycling at the moment. So we will also take measures to boost this recycling on the one hand by providing financial support to innovation and encouraging industrial applications, but also one important deliverable from the action plan is to assess the feasibility to harmonize separate collection within the EU further. So there are different work strands also on our side on that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we'll pass over to Sophie, who will moderate the discussion part of the circular talk. So over to you, Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks to all the speakers for your very excellent interventions. And also thank you to all participants, because I have seen the number is going up during the event itself, and we have over 120 participants. So that's good to know. I think it's a very relevant topic, as the presence of so many participants shows. In the chat, I already see a couple of questions. I will start with the questions that are addressed to the first panel, and then I will move to the questions that are addressed to the second panel. Sorry. So for the first panel, we have a question from Martin Dubois from the OECD, and he mentions that Mathieu and Jelmer argued in favor of setting reuse targets via EPR. However, the reuse potential depends on the quality collected. So on which basis should the reuse target be determined? Also, should the reuse targets be differentiated for export for reuse within or outside the EU? So if there's a speaker from the first panel who would like to respond to this question, please take the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. I already answered also in the chat. I think that we don't have to confuse reselling with reusing. Like for instance, in packaging, there's a clear difference between a reusable packaging and a disposable packaging, but textile in itself is reusable. At least most people wear textiles multiple times. And the number of times it shifts from owner is not the same as the reusability of the garment. So we believe that we have to look at quality more. So the number of times that a garment can be washed before it's worn off, that's probably the best indicator for the reusability of a garment, rather than the number of times it shifts ownership. So I would propose an indicator based on a quality. It's even also better measurable than the number of times it switches owner. Who is going to check whether to Africa exported garment is actually used there, or we're making things difficult for ourselves, I believe. But perhaps Mathieu has another opinion.
Thank you. Mathieu, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so we call on having targets to be developed if EPR schemes are implemented. It's simply to guarantee that there will be action taken to make sure that the textile which is collected will be indeed sought out for reuse before being directly sent for recycling. And we cannot call at this moment for like one target at EU level, which would be the same for everyone. At the moment, we simply call on member states to develop their own reuse targets for textiles based on the reality of the reusable fraction which exists on a given territory. And then on the question on whether we should have different targets for reuse locally and reuse abroad, I think it's a good question, but the thing is that then the role of social enterprises in this, like so in determining where is the demand, is difficult. So at the moment, I would say that we should have targets for reuse, including both reused locally and exported for reuse. But it might depend on local situations. Anyway, at this stage, I think it would be still relevant to make sure that textiles which cannot be sold locally because the demand might be limited, or at least at this point there is not enough demand for that, for all the textile which is collected in the EU, but it's still possible to reuse it outside of the EU, provided that some due diligence is taken on who is receiving these textiles, and to make sure that it will be indeed reused and not simply sent for landfilling.
Thank you. Next, I have a question from Alberto, and it's specifically addressed to Céline Fèvre. He asks, in your experience, do you think it's preferable to have two types of collection containers, one for clothes potentially destined for reuse, and another for collecting clothes destined for recycling? Céline, please.
Well, textile collection in France can be through containers or through association. While there are several channels to collect textiles, well, we just experience collection for every textile used textile. Which can be reused, or well, if it's not in good shape, recycle. Well, I don't have an opinion if it's important to have two channels. Maybe it would be quite complex to implement.
Very quickly, it's something which is considered by some of our members to set up dual collection systems for reuse and recycled textiles. It will facilitate the sorting out textiles and extracting the reusable fraction more easily. But only at the stage of it's experimented now, it's thought about. We cannot say if it's actually efficient at the moment.
Thank you. Other panelists who would like to respond on this idea of having two containers for separate collection? Jo, please, and then Femke.
Okay. I think there's another aspect which I didn't highlight, which is in the presentations you can download, is the fact that very often it is forgotten that we have chemical requirements for product safety reasons. Each time I hear it, oh, we are going to do reselling, we are going to do separate collection. We have no human eyes that can see what kind of chemicals are in each and every textile product, whether it's garments, non-garments, whatever it is. You need to know, you need to have traceability, you need to have transparency of what was used in those products. Every 6 months, our REACH regulation updates. A product that I'm wearing today might be in 6 months having stricter requirements and has different limitations of the chemicals used in that product. Hence, it is illegal to sell those products that on the European market if they do not comply with the REACH regulation. So just simply thinking, oh, a product on the market, let's reuse it, recycle it. No, we have to think about the chemicals we use and design in our products, that they are designed for reuse. If we just shred this t-shirt and we take somebody else's garment and we shred that all together and make it into one little lovely pot and make a new yarn out of it and weave a new textile product out of it, we might end up concentrating some of those chemicals that shouldn't be in there. And then the second thing is there needs to be proper market surveillance. Market surveillance is on an extremely low, under-supported, financially very weak position to do the level playing field, to ensure that everything that is imported on the EU single market also complies with these things. So before we think about collecting and reselling and sorting and all these things, we need to know exactly what is going into the recycling system. Without that, we are doing things that we should have been doing since the 70s. and we still haven't tackled that yet. This is something we need to think about now. I think that is something that is important for everybody who's listening today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jo. Next, I have Femke and then Stina. Femke, you're muted.
Excuse me. I think that Jo already made a very valid point, but I want to add something to it. If you see now that that the business model of the collectioners, they already have a model where they make a section for recycling, reuse, and I think there are already so many business models at the end of the chain. I think to the future it will be very interesting to see how you can make better business models in that. So next from the technical part, I think how can you improve that business model? I think that's a very important key, because last week I went to a very big collectioner in the Netherlands, and it's a very stupid example, but he makes a collection for what he can resell as secondhand material, and he said, well, in the Netherlands, for example, there are a lot of women blouses. And I can't resell that in the rest of the world because probably Dutch women like blouses, and the quality of the blouses is very good. But if there's not a market for the blouses, then there's also a problem. So it has not always to do with a very good material to, for example, resell it, but it also has to do with, is it in fashion or not? And I think if we are talking about circularity, about reselling, reuse, and so forth, we always forget that fashionable aspect of it, which is for consumers one of the most important motivation to sell or to buy or to buy not.
Thank you, Femke. Stina, would you like to add something?
Yes, I would like to add to what Jo was talking about, chemical safety, because that's a crucial element for us at IKEA. We do want to first and foremost reuse and then refurbish and then use the spare parts in our products. But at some point, recycling comes into play. And textile recycling is pretty difficult to do with confidence. We are doing a lot of research studies, among them one big together with H&M Group. And there are some worrying chemicals in the recycled post-consumer waste, not to a level where we would consider it dangerous to use in new products, but not at a level where we as a company feel 100% secure in using the material either. So I completely agree that we need to design for circularity, making sure that we don't use these chemicals anymore. We have phased out most of them from our range already in the 90s, so it shouldn't be that difficult. And we need to also have better market surveillance, because if our borders are open for any and all influx, it's difficult. We need to make sure that our market surveillance is well functioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Stina. Miriam, did you have something to add, please?
Yes, and exactly on the same topic, and regarding transparency, it's clear that European Commission has in the circular economy package some work to do on the digital product passport that will help as well develop more transparency in the value chain. And I can talk about it because it is indeed needed as well in the construction sector for long-lasting products, and it is doable for companies. But again, without an harmonized system, that will go nowhere, because we cannot spend as much money per country to develop local systems. Therefore, it's important that EPR schemes are developed in coordination with the other plans of the European Commission when it comes to transparency, with the digital product passport, and with the market surveillance. Again, this is really the case for harmonized framework with flexibility to ensure that for different products, the systems might be different but adaptable, but the market surveillance can only be dealt with at European level. Again, no country has the funds and the resource to fund its own market surveillance. Unfortunately, today it's only at a big scale that we can cooperate together for ensuring this market surveillance. It has been missing for EPBD, it has been missing for Eco-Design Directive implementation, it will be missing for the circular economy criteria as well. So the European Commission needs as well to have this circular thinking and cross and transverse development of policies.
Thank you, Miriam. And I invite you all to have a look at the chat where many interesting links are shared and also comments on this discussion. Another issue that is addressed in the comments in the chats is this idea of harmonization and how plausible it is or not is. And there is this idea in the chats that harmonization is interesting, but also that there is local conditions and the idea of whether a labeling system, like for example in the Nordics, would help. Are there panelists who would like to respond to that? Stina, please.
Yes, there is local differences, of course, but those differences are not as wide as the differences between the EPR systems. Today, for example, just the timing on when to report. We report somewhere annually, somewhere biannually, somewhere quarterly, somewhere every month. That's not a local condition saying that in Belgium you need one monthly information and in France you need once per year, just figuring out the numbers here. And also what should be reported is not really a very local thing either. I mean, if we can agree on eco-modulation on a European level, that should be applicable on all European markets. I can understand when it comes to collection and sorting that there can be differences that need to be sort of taken into consideration. I'm not oblivious to those differences, but as long as we can decide on a common label, for example, that is super important. And there is one good proposal in the chats. There are probably more. For us at IKEA, the most important thing is that we label our products for collection and sorting in the exact same way in the entirety of Europe. How we label them, as long as the consumer understands it, we can accept any label as long as it's harmonized. Reason being that we need those secondary raw material waste streams to be consistent, and we don't want to confuse the consumer with 27 different sorting instructions on the packaging. So for the consumer's sake and for the environment's sake, harmonization on labeling, super important for us. And I think that a lot of the administrative requirements could easily be harmonized between the EPR systems. It hasn't been done yet because it's not easy to think globally and act locally. I think that if the European Commission would have put clear demands from the beginning, that would have been a day of an everyday thing on the European EPR systems today. But now everybody has, of course, developed their own business models and their own ways of gathering the information, creating their data systems. So now it will be a little bit more of a struggle maybe to harmonize the administrative requirements, but that's a struggle worth taking for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Stina. Baptiste, please.
Yes, so I second also the part that is mentioned. Indeed, it's a big ask for this harmonization. We know that today it's mainly a national prerogative to deal with waste, or in some case even a municipal work to be able to do so. So first, anyway, it's not because it doesn't need to be always. We ask for the general harmonization at EU level. There is different way that we can work on that. We know we will have to work with every country to be able, every nation to be able to develop this system and to make sure that we can point at a solid and robust already framework developed at EU level to say this is what we need to follow, and to do our best with all our partners to be able to reach this conclusion and to make sure that nationally after this very system is properly implemented. So I think this is the task ahead. ahead. Indeed, we know from the beginning, and the Commission has been clear, the limitation of scope and of responsibilities, but this is still our work to make sure that this is the direction upon which we are going and that we can still reference to this harmonized framework to be able to implement it locally. So it will be a challenge, but exactly as mentioned earlier, it's a necessary challenge that we need to do. Otherwise, it's bound to be able to be inefficient.
Thank you very much, Baptiste. Are there other panelists who would like to share some thoughts regarding this harmonization? Otherwise, yeah, Jo, please.
I'll do it very quickly. As national federation, we cooperate, of course, with other EU national federations. And at a certain point, we already said we cannot wait until all these authorities and all these EU member states and all these regions at a certain point politically decide to align. I think it's a bit of an utopian dream at the moment because they have all other agendas and priorities. So we as industry federations, we already said we need to start already our actions and try to align and look for a system. So at the moment, I shared it in the chat. You can see a link there of the European action that we are taking between at least a few member states already. And hopefully it will be picked up more. There are some big industry players at the moment already involved in the Business Council. There's also a stakeholder forum. There's a task force. So there are many people who are open to join this initiative in order to actually make it work. Because 1st of Jan 2025, I can tell you, if you want to separate all different types of textiles that we have, we're wearing it, we're sitting on it, we're walking on it, it's in our cars, it's in our buildings, it's in agriculture, it's in so many different things. It will never be ready if we wait for this alignment. Hence, we already start to pave the road, let's say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. As you can see in the chat, there's many comments on the same topics, like basically the two questions that we addressed regarding collection on the one hand and harmonization on the other hand. It's maybe good to know for you that after this event, we will also write an output document in which we will highlight the main messages that came from this discussion. So you will find this back also in the output document. So we still have 15 minutes for Q&A. So if there's people who would like to address questions on other issues, please put them in the chat. Another issue that we wanted to address briefly with the panelists, because we are talking today about taking responsibility for textile waste. You can do this through EPR, but of course you can also do this by preventing the waste. And so we wanted to hear your views on whether ambition waste prevention targets could play a role, or what actions could actually lead to waste prevention, well, textile waste prevention. Is there any one of the panelists who would like to take the floor, please? Jo, please.
I think, first of all, zero waste approach. That's the first thing. It's a principle that exists. It's actually quite documented and available. It also means that you look at the way you design your products. It also looks at optimization of how you do your production process. Because if you look at how that we assemble textile products, very often we tend to, for a big portion, weave first of all certain fabrics, then we cut them up, and then we try to assemble them all again. Well, you could also do the same thing by knitting from a single yarn and making the product. So there are multiple ways of assembling products. So you have to look at all various steps. If you want to avoid waste, then you stop talking about waste, you talk about resources. You can find it all on the internet. I leave the rest for the colleagues to talk about, but I think that's the big one to begin with.
Thank you. Martin, please.
Yeah, I think, of course, depending on what type of textiles you're talking about, I'm talking now about post-consumer garments. It's all about durability. And if I look at the definition Yema gave about reusability in terms of durability, how often can I wash a garment, for example, how often can I use it? The way to prevent waste is to, first of all, increase the durability of the garment, and secondly, also to have then systems in place where we can ensure a reuse of the garment if, for whatever reason, I don't want it anymore because I might have gained weight, lost weight, I don't like it anymore. For whatever reason, I might discard it as first consumer, but it's still technically okay. So we need to, first of all, have a high durability in the garments, and we have to have channels for reuse then with second, third, fourth owners of a product before it goes to whatever kind of recycling, circularity recycling process. And talking about reuse, keeping the garment or the textile in its first function in alive is always better than any recycling process, because we will not have a recycling process where we don't use electricity, water, whatever kind of resources, where you don't have any kind of waste out of this process. I mean, a fully circular process without resources will not be possible. So keeping the textile, the garment, in its first use as long as possible must be key of any system.
Thank you. Mathieu, please.
Yes, well, I'll simply repeat that eco-design is the most important, I think, policy to make sure that that textile can be as durable as possible. It's indeed something that will be extremely important on the second-hand market, but simply also for people to keep their items as much as possible. Maybe, and also because like waste prevention, it will be about simply putting less textiles on the market. So it's happening if people keep their products for longer because they don't need so much new products. But the reality is that even if products are more durable, if people are encouraged to buy new simply through commercials for advertisements, there will be a limit to these eco-design policies. So I don't know how yet, but we should think about ways to simply discourage consumer to buy so much. So I know it's complicated, but acting already on green claims is the first step for that. So simply limiting the ability for brands to say, yeah, you can buy our product, it's new, but it's okay because there is recycled content and it's sustainably sourced. We have to understand that buying new, even if it's with durable products, even if it's with recycled content, is still something which is not as good as simply keeping your own clothes first and then buying second hand. So that's extremely important. And maybe another step which could be taken is to simply support textile repairers. It's something which is being investigated in Austria, for example, for electronics. So maybe have like develop vouchers for people to be able to repair their clothes could be a solution. And yeah, simply trying to find solutions on how we can limit the impact of fast fashion and how we can reduce the quantity of textiles put on the market in the first place.
Thank you. Mathieu Giel, please.
Yes, thanks, Sophie. I just wanted to highlight that since you asked whether we consider the setting of waste prevention targets to be a feasible option, I just wanted to highlight that with the 2018 amendment of the Waste Framework Directive, also a review clause was inserted that by 2024 we have to consider the setting of waste prevention, further waste prevention measures, including targets. So we have now started working on assessing this feasibility, and with textiles as one of the priority sectors. This call has been strengthened by the Circular Economy Action Plan that really calls for limiting waste generation in the first place. So this is work that we are undertaking that is not strictly related to only textiles, but waste in a broader sense. But I still thought it was relevant to highlight it here.
Thank you. Next, I see in the chat a remark from Estefania about, and this nicely links to a question on how to engage consumers in EPR, because she asks how to address overconsumption through EPR. Are there panelists who would like to take the floor on this one? Jelmer, please.
Well, perhaps a bit disappointing answer, but I don't think that EPR is the policy tool to work on this cultural thing that has gone wrong in our society, where just buying stuff is a way to achieve happiness. So I'm sorry, EPR won't solve this. This is a cultural thing that we have to solve amongst each other. I have 3 women in my house, 2 daughters, and 1 wife. On all sustainability topics, men are probably to blame, but when it comes to garments, the other sex is the biggest challenge.
Mathieu, please.
Yeah, I would say that to address overconsumption through EPR, well, there's like we should use as much of the EPR fee as possible to finance prevention activities. So like awareness raising campaigns, but not only that, also to simply to use the EPR fee to finance prevention activities, so maybe repair, reuse, and preparing for reuse, of course. But these activities are already like a bit lower than prevention on the waste hierarchy. So we need to encourage that. But my feeling is more or less the same. Like EPR won't solve the overconsumption issue. It's simply trying to put a bandage on this issue. I have the feeling. So yeah, we need to find other solutions. It's a tool to limit its impact, but we need much more like stricter rules on putting textiles on the market and other products as well, if we want to actually reduce consumption.
Thank you for your interventions, and we have an interesting comment in the chat that it's also about shifting from owning to using. So that might be another way to address it. One other issue raised in the chat, and I guess that will be one of the last points in this Q&A, is the role of remanufacturing, whether it can be in the waste hierarchy, a step between reuse and recycling. And maybe if we extend that a bit, are there issues that need to be solved in order to facilitate remanufacturing when it comes to textiles? In case there is comments on that from the panelists, please raise your hand so I can give you the floor. Stina, please.
I hesitated a bit to raise my hand because we at IKEA, we talk a lot about refurbishment and remanufacturing, and are looking into a lot of new business models on that theme, but we haven't been focusing that much on textiles so far. We start with the furniture, that is the big bulk for us. But I would guess that the same problems will come into play for textiles as for all of these, that a lot has to do with really boring and nitty-gritty stuff, such as definition of waste. Today on many markets, the consumer decides when something is waste, and then it's no longer available to us. It's taken care of by waste handlers, and we cannot be waste handlers on all different markets. So I think that to facilitate new business models based on reuse and refurbishment and harvesting of spare parts or spare textiles, I think that it's important to look into any legislation that we rewrite and see, is this fit for a circular economy? That has been done to some extent with the digital economy. We're still not there, but now you look always, is this legislation fit also for a digital economy? Maybe we need to do that as well for a circular economy when new legislative proposals are presented.
Thank you, Mathieu. You're muted.
Yes, sorry. Concerning new business models, where we like to consider that social enterprises doing reuse, like they're already, like they're not a new secular business model. They exist for many years now, so we cannot really call them new secular business models, but they surely are secular business models. And in a way, like there is a kind of agreement on the fact, not really an agreement, but it's often said that we do not need so many new technologies for reuse. Like what we need now is investments in recycling, because we know how it's done. We do not really need investments there. We think it's not true, because there are a lot of new technologies, of new methodologies that could improve the reuse rates of used textiles. We've mentioned dual collection systems before, so as I said, it's still under experimentation. There are some who disagree that it wouldn't improve reuse rates. We still think that it's best to simply test it before saying if it's not working or not, and maybe it will work in some places and not in others. We still need to have some flexibility in terms of what methodologies we should implement. But like, for example, I'll give one concrete example, which is developed by our members at the moment. It's the use of digital platforms for the sale of second-hand textiles. It's something which was not considered before, because our members were thinking that going through the hassle of creating a post for each type of for each piece of textile that you want to sell would be too time consuming, and that it wouldn't be worth it. But I don't want to say thanks, but because of COVID, they had to switch to this form of sale, and it ended up being rather successful. And helping the reuse sector adapt to these new forms of sale is something that could be also supported at EU level. So there are ways to improve the reuse rates, and they should be also investigated.
Thank you, Mathieu. Jo, please.
I think it is important to also look at it at another angle. You asked about remanufacturing. We can do a lot of things. We can redesign, remanufacture, we can repair, we can build that all in, we can do the eco-design principles, but there's one important link. We all share responsibility, all of us, for the eco-footprint throughout the lifespan of a product, because you can buy, I put it in the chat as well, you can buy a product, it has user instructions, but if people can't read or don't want to read the user's instructions anymore, and textiles, let's face it, a lot of it have to be cleaned with water and some soap or whatever, or no soap at all because it's a protective product and other things have to be used. If that is not even done properly, then it's game over for that product. It's end of life. So everything we built in is something that we all bear responsibility for. So there's a limit to what we can do as an industry. There's a limit of what you can build in and try to achieve with an EPR system or any other system. And I think this is making everybody responsible for their own behavior. This is education. This is behavioral change. And I think this is in our easy to buy single-use products economy that we are currently stuck in. We need to invest also in that. This is just a small point I wanted to add.
Thank you very much. Jo, Femke, please.
Yes, I wanted to react on the remark of Mathieu about, if I understood well, recycling is not a problem. And I think what really worries me, especially when I'm talking with different people, that I see the tendency that everyone is going to defend that there are recycling options, and there's no doubt about that. I mean, those are those pearls I mentioned before, but the scaling up of initiatives to make it suitable for the market, for the brands. Yeah, I think that's a really big problem. And in the Netherlands, we register the materials companies use on a collective level because of the Dutch agreement on sustainable textiles. And what we see there is that companies, brands, they don't know how to get recycled materials in their apparel. So we see that there's a serious problem. And I think if we can't tackle that, then we are really facing a problem, because what we are going to do is that we are going to collect more and more textiles European-wide. But if there's no way to proceed all that textile properly, we have a big problem, because then in the end we still have to burn those textiles. So I just want to stress that really carefully. And also, I think that we really need a lot of resources also to invest in those innovations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all those who, Mathieu and Martin, you still want to intervene. So if you could make the last interventions very brief, because I'm having a look at the time and we're coming to the close. First Mathieu and then Martin, please.
Yeah, very quickly, just as a reaction at what just been said. I don't say that we don't need any investment in recycling. It's not what I say. I simply say that we also need investments in reuse, and that we shouldn't use the EU strategy for textiles to only find ways to finance recycling. And indeed, even if textile is more durable and if we use it for longer, at the end it needs to be recycled for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Martin,
I also
please.
want to react on that, but I think we have no time for that. But I think it's important to discuss this. Also, the difference between recycling, reusing, and what do you think about it, and what are the latest market developments?
Martin, please. You're still muted.
Sorry, thank you for that. I think what Femke said is very true. Right now we are going into 2025 with a separate collection, but we still don't have real recycling solutions for the quantities we are going to collect. So what we are going to have is downcycling or at worst incineration, and we need to speed that process up. And we have 3 pillars in that. We have one is the producers, where we need to see that we get recyclable materials into the products, and that we also know what is in the products, like material passports, etc. We don't have a view on that right now. There are a couple of projects going on there, but they are still in an early stage. And this legacy problem we will have for the next 20 years, because until we have collected everything which has been produced up till now and recycled that, it will take some time. Then we need to have the technologies, and there are some technologies emerging at the moment, but they are still very limited in terms of what they can take as raw materials, and many of them are not economically viable if we are talking about real or semi-circular solutions. So we need to work on that as well, and this was going to be a tough one to get this scaled up in the next 4 years to a level which can then also be in line with the level of what we want and what we see to increase the collection side of the post-consumer textiles.
Thank you, Martin. And unfortunately, we don't have an in-person meeting, because then I would invite everyone to continue the discussion over coffee. We don't have that opportunity today, but we are saving the chats. We are also continuing this discussion online in our LinkedIn group. And so for sure, if not only for the output document, this is also very inspiring for maybe future events that we are organizing. So thank you very much. I will hand over to Emily for some wrap up, next steps and conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie, and thank you to all for that discussion. So in very briefly, I'm just going to quickly sum up some of the main ideas which we've heard this afternoon, a non-exhaustive list. So yeah, we heard about targets and the risk that without them we may not prioritise the right things in an EPR scheme. We covered governance and the importance of ensuring that that we get the governance right. Of course, we also covered, this has come up many times, that the idea of EPR as just one tool in the policy toolkit, and the idea that EPR won't get the job done alone. We, of course, heard from the European Commission, who is considering EPR as one measure within the broader landscape of policy action to make sustainable products the norm. And we heard about, and within that broader policy landscape, we also heard about the need to tackle misleading claims, transparency, product passports, and the importance of eco-design to achieve quality products. We, of course, heard a clear call from many speakers for harmonisation. And we discussed whether it was plausible or not plausible, and of course the other side to the harmonisation coin about considering local conditions that may hamper harmonisation. We heard about collaborative initiatives such as rehubs, and also how harmonising in the EU could possibly set a good example globally. One thing that came up across many of the speakers was the need to define the objective of EPR as key to implementing it properly. So formulating the goals, whether that means going beyond recyclability, for example. But there was a clear call for governments to decide what they want to reward through an EPR scheme and through potentially eco-modulation to incentivise those who perform best. Yes, we also heard from some speakers as well the need to move away from old ways of thinking about EPR, so that it's more than just a waste scheme. And final few points, the idea that one EPR system will not fit all textiles, so we need clear definitions for these very textile products, which we all know. And the role, and finally, we heard about the role of all stakeholders, for example, including sorting companies, and consumers, as you know, is it sorting companies or consumers who decide whether a textile is usable or not? The main point here was really that no stakeholder should be left behind. So that's probably a nice note to end on, as we are in the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform Circular Talk series. And we heard, of course, in the beginning, the opening remarks from Killian Lohan, who clearly made this call to continue stakeholder engagement on the question of EPR for textiles. So with that, I will leave it there, and thank everybody for their participation, and particularly to the panelists who have really nourished the discussion today, and it's been really great to hear all the interventions. And yeah, thank you so much to everybody, really appreciate it. And of course to all the other co-organisers as well, and to the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform Secretariat. As Sophie said, the discussion doesn't end there. We have the LinkedIn group, which Sophie will put the link in the chat now, I think, if it's not already there. And so you can continue to discuss after this webinar is over. So please jump in there and we can engage the discussion there. The next EU Circular Talk on textiles will take place on the 9th of November at 10 o'clock in the morning, and that is on circular design. And that is it. That's the last thing to say. So once again, thank you very much to everybody, and I wish you a good rest of the afternoon.